Well, it's finally here. After 12 months of working on my next book, it's here. It's released on May 21st, but you can pre-order your copy now. Let's take a look. It's called UNFREEDOM of the Press. UNFREEDOM of the Press. Is there a word called unfreedom? Of course there is. If there wasn't, I wouldn't put it on the cover of my book. But I didn't know that. I knew there were the word unfree and so forth, so I said to my wife, I want to do the opposite of freedom of the press in the title. She said, well, how about unfreedom of the press? I said, okay, is that a word? She said, it is. Because that's what we're talking about, folks, unfreedom of the press. And what I do in this book is truly unique. It's not just a book filled with statistics, filled with quotes from reporters, filled with all that sort of stuff. I've written all these books. Well, there's one or two missing, but I've written all these books. This one's very, very different. This is not a textbook. It's not a college-level book. It is a substantive book. It is a serious book. And what I do in the first chapter is I go through the evidence, which is overwhelming, of the partisan media. You say, well, we already know that. No, I provide the black and white evidence of the partisan media. I go back a significant period of time up to this period and look at the data. So we provide that. Then I move on and talk about your history. What's the history of the press anyway? The history prior to the revolution, the history during the revolution, the history in the earlier part of the republic. Then what happened at the turn of the century, during the progressive era, the last century? What did that do to the media? And I talk about that because it had a profound effect. And then I talk about the ideology that professors have pushed into the media, that they continue to push into the media. I don't want to give the whole book away. I'm just showing you that there's a logic to this. It's not just about what's going on today, but it includes what's going on today. It actually includes a lot on the Russia issue, but it's not exclusive. You've seen all of that on TV. This is much deeper and broader than that. What drives these journalists? What drives these newsrooms? Who are these people? And I talk at length about propaganda. What's propaganda? Where does that come from? I talk at length about pseudo-events, the creation of pseudo-events. Like what? Like collusion. I talk about lies by omission, lies, affirmative lies. And then I do something else in this book which will be unexpected to a lot of people. This president has been accused of leading a war against the media. Jim Acosta will have a book out 2, 3, 4 weeks after mine, and it's something I was anticipating when I wrote my book. Is Donald Trump a great threat to freedom of the press? What has Donald Trump done exactly to freedom of the press? He's done exactly nothing. He directs his anger correctly and his disappointment at specific news organizations, at specific reporters. He'll call them here and there enemy of the people, and they say, that's just like Stalin. Let me tell you something, folks. Donald Trump has done nothing to the media. And I go through the history and compare what he's done to what past presidents have done. The great John Adams, the great Abraham Lincoln. I go into what others have done. Woodrow Wilson, things that you've never heard of before. And I move from Woodrow Wilson to Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt to John Kennedy to Lyndon Johnson and others. They had true censorship operations that took place. Trump has none of these things, and I go into detail about that so you'll understand context. You'll have more knowledge about the media today by looking at the past and looking at the present and anticipating the future than anybody else. What else do I do? I get into the issue of the New York Times in particular. That's the paper that leads the way, whether we like it or not. That's the newspaper that the other news organizations look at. Well, let's look at the history of the New York Times. And I do it in a way that has never, ever been done before. Have you ever heard of, in 1927, 1928, the great genocide of the Ukrainians by Stalin? How he cut Ukraine off from food, water, cut off their trains, cut off their roads. 10 million people starved to death. Do you want to know how the New York Times reported on that during the course of the year? I explain. It is atrocious. How about the Holocaust? You've heard me talk about that too. Well, I did significant research on this issue, and I talk about what the New York Times did in terms of reporting the Holocaust, or not. Horrific. There's an entire chapter on both of these combined. And yet it's the paper of record, and yet it's the paper that people want to work for if you're a journalist and so forth. Why? So I get into great detail about it and other news organizations as well. Then we tackle the issue, what is news? What is journalism? What does it mean to be objective? Are they objective? And you know the answer to that. But I put the muscle on the bone, the meat on the bone, as we go through this book. This book is very readable. I made sure it was very readable. I think you're going to find it very compelling, very difficult to put down. I cover a lot of territory, the modern media, the past media, our history. I take our president, how they've treated our president, how they've treated other presidents, depending on their party, depending on their ideology, and you're going to see it all laid out. And I think it'll be enormously compelling. And I also figure I'll come under attack. They'll have all the usual examinations of a book to see if there's any plagiarism or something like that. I don't do plagiarism. Do you know how many endnotes are in this book? This book's only about 250 pages long. It's about the width of this book. Do you know how many endnotes there are? Over 400. Over 400. That is unheard of. So this book is ironclad in terms of its scholarship, in terms of its research. It will come under attack, as will I, and that's okay. That's the nature of the beast. I'm ready. But what I want to make sure is that you get your copy of this book and you're ready when it comes out. It comes out on May 21st on a Tuesday because that's what publishers do. I don't understand it. You can go to Amazon.com, you can go to Barnes & Noble, whatever, online. It's not in the bookstores yet, not until May 21st. But if you want to get an advance copy, pre-order your copy, so when it's released, and we talk about it here, we talk about it on Fox, we talk about it on radio, you will be up to speed. This is not going to be a hard read. It's not going to be a laborious thing. Oh, there's a book, I got to read it. I suggest to you that once you start this book, you're not going to want to put it down. The other thing about this book, and the way I wrote it the way I did, you can share it with liberals. You can share it with people who are on the fence. You can share it with family members or coworkers. It's very, very important. Very important that we understand what's going on in this country, what is supposed to be a free press. And so the time is propitious. It's really quite remarkable that I announced the book today because it went on Amazon today, that it'll be out May 21st, which is what, less than 2 months from now. The timing was just what the timing is. It takes me 12 months to 16 months to write a book. This took 12 months. We had some, setbacks in the family, but I worked very, very hard over the Christmas vacation and worked very hard till 3 or 4 in the morning to wrap it up. And I think you're going to really, really enjoy it. So my suggestion to you is go ahead onto Amazon or one of the other sites, order your copy right now so it shows up on the release date, because we're going to hit the ground running. You're going to hear me talking about it from time to time right here, as well as on my radio show, as well as on my Fox show. It's too important. The press has enormous power in this country, and we need to talk about who they are, why they are who they are, in the aggregate, where they get these ideas from, what it is that they're actually doing. Do they actually have any standards? What's the difference between news and opinion, or news analysis, or news interpretation? What's the difference between news and news activism and news social activism? We're going to get into all this. It may sound a little overwhelming because I've only been talking about 9 minutes. It's not. It's going to be truly, I think, compelling. And we're going to make our case.
Want to see more? Sign up for LevinTV.